All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, we've got new spring and we should climax today.
All right.
I did wear the 333 because it does get a little dark at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. I was curious what your thoughts were leading up to that because I didn't really have much to talk about in the first few chapters here. So we left off, we're on chapter 23. Lan had just uh, basically run off in a huff because he was sick and tired of Moiraine and went off to the palace and then got turned into a boy toy. So,
Uh, my first note on that is 292, but we probably should set it up with just a scene where
mhm.
Moiraine is going around looking at these
Uh-huh.
basically the trashiest inns she can because she thinks she knows her friends so well. And you know, just because you grew up poor and you got to middle class doesn't mean you're not going to at least upgrade a little bit, you know. So,
Especially
she,
with how trashy these places were. I mean, for
yeah,
crying out right loud, someone tried to slip her a roofie.
that's where I was going to get to
Yeah.
because someone almost did slip her a roofie, but then she made the lady drink her own drink and then left her there knowing what these people are going to do.
Hmm.
And that's 292 with Moraine leaving. And that's where I said this is where the comparisons with Matt end. Matt would never have done that to a guy or a girl, evil or good.
Hmm.
Anytime he does have to leave somebody, there's always that paragraph of regret
Yeah.
with him in it. Like he had to leave because life was taking him away from it, not because he had a choice. Where she that I mean, that's pretty cold blooded.
Oh yeah.
She knew exactly what was going to happen to this lady, and she walks out like, you deserved it.
Yeah, but you see her justification. Her justification is how many people did you do this to? I know I'm not the only one.
Mm-hmm.
That's
But
so
there's a
you
difference
you can see
between
her
figuring out a way to
justification.
make sure that never happens again and actually putting it's the definition of eye for an eye, realistically.
You know what it reminds me of? I don't know if you ever saw it, but I don't remember who did this. And they got away with it because they never actually called him the Punisher. But there was this short that someone did and put up on YouTube with Thomas Jane, who was in a very underrated Punisher movie, kind of right before the MCU actually officially kicked off. Um, and I thought of that when I read this scene, which I hadn't watched it in a while. I need to go look for it. But because that's how it ends. He beats the crap out of this basically this pimp
Mm-hmm.
who's who's abusing these women, and then he leaves them like with his legs broken and says, you want to know the difference between revenge and punishment? And he pours out whiskey all over the guy and then puts a lit Zippo down in front of him with the beat up horse standing right there, and then just walks away. And then that's the camera just kind of pans down and ends on the lighter there, and you see the women walking over to it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I was thinking. I was like, when I read this scene, is she's a little Punisher. She's got a little Punisher in her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, she's definitely colder than Matt
Hmm.
ever could be,
Hmm.
and we get that in the regular series where she literally said she'll kill him if she has to if they're turning the wrong way.
Yeah, it's one of the things I like so much about this book because we've pointed out where you see her humanity and where you see, you know, how she got to who she becomes when we first see her in Eye of the World, and you know it's not that like the world broke her or something. um it's that she was hardened because that humanity was there, but she came from a place where your compassion would just be used against you. You had to be cold, you had to be
Mm-hmm.
calculating, or there were dire consequences. And then she went to a place that was even worse.
Which is funny because the other day I came across this podcast talking about personality tests, and a lot of literature is straying away from the Big Five because it doesn't do well when you get outside of American culture. It doesn't work cross culturally. And so they kind of played with a lot of things to try to see if they can come up with something more universal. And they came up with this hexaco test, which is it's 6 instead of 5. And they break up and they have honesty and humility as one. And instead of neuroticism, they call it emotionality. And when it turns out is when they just changed a few things to kind of get a little bit more accurate cross-cultural makeup, women aren't that agreeable after all. They're outwardly agreeable and they're vicious on the inside.
Shocking.
Shocking.
It's my shocked face.
I'm still highly agreeable though, apparently.
This is my shocked face. All right. Um,
But yeah, it was funny. But this is where the Matt comparisons ended for me because he can never be that cold. Now and in this we've talked about the development because we do see her as a human. It was a pretty quick change to go from she went from 0 to 60 in this chapter. We got pettiness. We had a lot of pettiness with Lan, but we didn't have coldness.
Yeah. Okay, here it is. So then it finishes up with the chapter finishes up with Siuan explaining what the reader should already have been able to put together because we've been seeing both Moiraine and Lan's point of view. So you've already had a few hints about how the Black isn't just looking for children because they don't know they're just looking for a child.
Mm-hmm. I did find her thoughts about the kind of the class system there, and her own thoughts about ruling, where it's even the best rulers try to bring people up, but it's going to be a constant thing no matter what. And I'm like, it's not like we don't have 160 something episodes of the other part of this podcast that talk about exactly why equity is futile.
All right.
And actually, those are all my notes. I have a lot of thoughts, but those are all my notes because I finished the book listening to it. So,
all right. Well, so the next chapter is Moiraine getting things together to she's going to have to be herself, which she doesn't really want to do, but they decide it's the only way to get into the palace. And here we go. Yep. So
what page?
so 305, the end of chapter 24 here. This made me laugh out loud. Because you get way more evidence here that Moiraine and Siuan are both very inexperienced when it comes to sex and romance, except with each other. But then again, they don't have a freaking lesbian love affair, you stupid morons. It was more practical than anything. But Siuan took her firmly by the shoulders and turned her around, eyeing her up and down critically. A lady's maid is supposed to make sure her mistress is properly dressed, she said, and gave Moiraine a push towards the door. Go, the Châtillon is waiting for you, and with any luck, a young footman named Cal is waiting for Suki. Which is so I liked the double surprise here because or the two surprises because Moiraine thinks she knows Siuan and is so he's looking all these, you know, flea bag motels, and Siuan is like, why are you surprised I'm staying here? It's, you know, affordable and it's clean. So, and then now again, where Moiraine is shocked that not only is Siuan willing to use her feminine charms to uh, get information from this young serving lad, but she's able to. She's capable. She actually, she can actually wield those feminine charms.
Well, and the very first thought in the next chapter is shows her still ladiness and class. A footman, not a footman.
Yeah, and that's the other part of it that I love is that that's what has her hung up. Not that her her friend and pillow friend and comrade in arms here is is willing to canoodle to try and get information and you know weasel her way into a position, but that it's with a footman. That's where she's really hung up, is that it's with a footman. Uh, there's another part to it though that was kind of I wonder that I kind of feel like part of what may be going on here is that Moiraine is trying to justify in her own head why she wouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to wonder if she couldn't do that, because that this is actually something from Siuan, and we see it a little bit later, after she's been, you know, when she's not being imperious and overbearing, after she's been stilled, you know, Leanne's the one that's really doing it, but Siuan's being feminine as well when she has to be. I'm not sure Moiraine is capable of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And we never see her doing it. When she puts on her feminine charms, it's the air of a lady. It's not the air of a coquette or a suitor or something like that. So part of me wonders, is this also you know, she doth protest too much. Dang it, cat. I'm the only one home right now, so the animals are extra lonely and pathetic. The dog keeps carrying around his squeaky toy and whimpering. I don't know what that's about, but he's been doing that a lot. And the cats keep coming in here because my daughter isn't here for them to hang out with. All right. And this one has no thought for personal space. Okay. Chapter 25. So we're getting awful close here. Um
Let's see.
so this is stupid cat. I thought I was safe because I didn't have dogs running under my feet, but apparently not. Um, this is probably kind of the last moment of levity in the book, which is when Moiraine uh has to deal with what's her name? Um the cougar's daughter. Uh
Oh, yeah. Ezel.
yeah. Um that her snootiness and for all of her mother's machinations, she just wants to get out of there. She wants as little to do with it as Lan does.
Mm-hmm.
Um, along with we get a little glimpse at her personality that she is nowhere near as formidable as her mother is. Here she is, 17 years old, which is young, but we've glimpsed who Moiraine was when she was a teenager. That even as a child, even as a teenager, she was already fairly well schooled in the game because she had to be in Karheen. And you would think, yeah, they claim they don't play the game of houses, but they do play politics, and there are other concerns that in the Borderlands that are supposed to strengthen you. But you kind of get a glimpse here, like she's been sheltering this girl her whole life, while the mother makes plans,
Hmm.
makes and executes the plans in much the same way that she's making plans for Lan and doesn't give a damn what he thinks.
Hmm.
And also isn't going to be overly concerned with uh, whatever objections he might have or whatever problems there might arise. It's no, it's going to be this way, and that's the way it is. Um,
Which is the short sightedness of pure narcissism, because
mm,
you know she's trying to get Lan to be with Izel to continue the power line. But if you're sheltering your daughter in this way, and you're the maneuverer of all the machinations, eventually it's going to end with Izel, because she is not going to be capable of continuing everything you're working on.
mhm.
But it's all about me, 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 me. You are a prop for my attention.
Yep, yep. How much
Go
is
to episode 182, part 2, for some of that in our discussion there.
yeah? How much is the daughter even a daughter, and how much is she just another piece on the board,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um,
Then we get the confrontation between Moiraine Sedai and Lan, King of Malkir. No longer
mhm.
just partners on the road.
Yeah, yeah. That um, it, it's interesting to me on two levels. First of all, they they kind of see in their confrontation with each other that if they just would have been more open in the first place, both of them, a lot of this could have been avoided. But neither one of them are going to say that because admitting, yeah, I guess I could have been a little more open, or you could have been more open, then I would have to admit that I would be more open. So I'm just going to keep being stubborn here. But we'll just shift the stubbornness on to another phase. Um, the uh, despite how friendly she was with Rhine, she says Bukama, only him. Don't have the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
Now her reasoning turns out to be off, but it's a good thing she does have good political instincts
Mm-hmm.
because her thinking was, well, uh he was too fawning over a pretty lady and the title of Aes Sedai, so I can't trust him to spy on one. Um, all right, and then everything goes to heck, and it becomes quite tragic.
Yeah. So Bakama does start spying, and he ends up dead with the candlestick in the library,
Yep.
or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And it doesn't close the loop, but the way he died pretty much tells you who did it.
Hmm. Um, and of course he runs straight to Moiraine because
Yeah. Well, because first of all, he knows the power was used to push him down the stairs,
mhm,
and you know, shoot, he just basically lost his surrogate father.
mhm. And all because you showed up again. Who are you and what the hell is going on? Um, but it lets Moiraine know. Moiraine now becomes certain that Marine is black because she knows it wasn't her that tried to shove Lan down the stairs. And I mean,
It's
she
either
wasn't
her,
there,
Siuan, or Maureen.
and
Marine, yeah.
she can be confident it wasn't Siuan. So, um,
Well, if Estelle was telling the truth, it could have been her. If she can channel.
hmm. So, all right, so 322 then is where it all comes together from Moiraine. And um again, I one of the things I like about Jordan's style, and I've said this before in going through the other books, is that he's it's kind of a cheat because he can he can show you someone's reaction to something to build someone up.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see like Rand or the Emmons Fielders, especially in the first couple of books, the way they react to Moiraine and the way she's so calm and she'll just kind of cock an eyebrow, and they build her up for us, but he doesn't actually have to go through the work of figuring out how she figured it out or how she did what she did, or even if she did, and the others are just assuming and she's letting them assume because it builds her up, right? But in this book, we actually do see the details because it is from her point of view. So, and I like the way it all clicks together here on page 322, where she starts quickly running through her mind. And these are all things she's kind of figured out or partially figured out along the way. And now she's just lining them all up together. She's realizing that, oh, this belongs here and this over here belongs here too. And this thing over here that I dismissed, yeah, it belongs here too. And now when you put it all together, now I know what the heck is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then they run off and everybody dies. And it's tragic.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, especially since it starts with the boy. For a father to have to watch his boy
mhm,
before
mhm.
himself gets killed. I mean, you don't want it to happen, but you'd want to go first, or at
And
least and go in a way that you're doing something where you could prevent it. In this case, completely helpless.
um, so 323 is when it all um comes to a head, and I like the the casual evilness of it with Marine, but Marine did not even blink. You did well enough killing the spy, Reen, she said calmly as she wove a gag of air to stop up Issel's mouth and bonds that held the girl stiff and wide-eyed. See if you can make certain of the younger one this time. You did say you were the better swordsman. Um, and then they go at it. Um, where is it? All right, so it's 325 where she throws the boy over the side. Um, Derek floated to the air, struggling against the bonds he could not see as he drifted over the railing. First, his head twisted, following his son, and his mouth worked around his unseen gag. Blah blah blah. And Boy falls, because Jordan likes to hurt you, the reader.
Hmm.
Where is it? Where he drops, there it is at the bottom of 325. So I like the way he has Briss. I like his death scene. It reminds me in some ways of Ingtar, the way it's stoic and understated.
Hmm.
Briss floated over the railing. Moiraine tottered to her feet. Determination, that look of pure hate etched on his brace. Briss fell, never making a sound. So he's just staring pure hatred at knowing he can't do anything, but so the only act of defiance he can make, he's going to make, which is uh defiantly staring hatred at her the whole way down. No show of fear, no show even uh of anything but determination and hatred. That just pure seething anger at this evil witch who killed his son.
Well, and here's that I said I arrogance too. Marine only loses because she does not think that Moraine can do anything but with the power. She turns her back to her.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, I shouldn't say that.
What?
For spoilers. There's a parallel that we just saw not that long ago.
Okay, okay. So
Yeah, there's an
you
interesting
need me to
parallel that
take a note.
I hadn't quite thought of, and now I go, I wonder if that was on purpose. Um, yeah, so there's an interesting parallel in the regular series, uh, but it is as harsh as it it had to be because as I've been saying the whole way through, Moraine's gonna have a rude awakening. I mean, this is her first mission. It's her first expedition out of the White Tower. It's not even official. It's her own thing. She's, you know, she's barely an Aes Sedai. She's literally still learning how to be an Aes Sedai. As she and Siuan think multiple times after they're raised, yeah, the sisters who said there's as much, if not more, to learn once you're raised weren't kidding. And she hasn't learned it yet. She's still learning. And all of this gets shoved in her face of not just the personal tragedy, and she has to live with the fact that she's partly to blame for it, of um sending Buhama to spy and he gets killed, not putting the pieces together quickly enough, not being powerful enough to stop these three innocent people from being killed by this Black Ajah. So all of that is gonna just come down on her like a ton of bricks. And so you can see, and then you have 20 more years of probably nothing quite this terrible, but 20 more years of rough going
Hmm.
to be kind of the lone person in the world. Because I mean, Sawan knows, but she's in the tower dealing with the political side. So out in the world, it's just Moiraine and Lan. They're the only ones really, certainly as far as Moiraine knows, who knows what's going on and how important what she's doing is. All right. Did you have any other thoughts?
Uh, no, not on that. I mean, sucks. Well, there's a little parallel in this same fight. I talked about Marine being arrogant in her
Mhm.
thinking Moraine is done because she's shielded. Well, Lan's fight ends that exact same way too. He lost an arm basically, and he won because the other guy thought he was not going to be able to fight properly and
There's a
walked him to
parallel with that
death.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a that happens again later too.
Yeah, and Lan actually explains it to Moraine of how he survived, but you
Mhm.
see Moraine be a benefactor of that exact same thing just moments before.
All right.
And
Um,
then the epilogue.
and then the epilogue. So they put the pieces together, Siuan and Moiraine, all the things that we've kind of all figured out, and then solidify what we already knew, what we were told in the Great Hunt of you go out in the world and deal with this. I keep an eye on what's going on in the tower and help you from the tower. Um, and 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 work on our goal from there. Uh, and off she goes after Lan. And then okay, I like the. I mean, this is the end here. I like how essentially because there's just the 2 pages left. So page 333 at the top there, where I fight the same war as you against the shadow. Moiraine was Black Ajah. She told him all of it, from Jatara's foretelling in the presence of Amerlin's seat and to accepted, to what she and Siuan had reasoned out, the deaths of Tamar's searchers, every last bit. For another man, she would have left most unsaid, but there were few secrets between Warder and Aes Sedai. For another man, she might have softened it, but she did not believe hidden enemies frightened him, not even when they were Aes Sedai. You said you burned your past. Let the past have its ashes. This is the same war, Lan. The most important battle yet in that war, and this one you can win.
Can.
Can.
Not probable, not likely, but can.
It's certainly not will.
You're saying there's a
Yep.
chance.
So it ends with, I mean, and we've seen glimpses of the Moiraine that we know, like when she's dealing with the people in the tower, when she's dealing with the seamstress, when she's dealing with the other Aes Sedai who want to put her on the throne. We see the Moiraine that we know. Who's like, okay, yeah, that's Moiraine. I know her. I remember her from the Eye of the World and Dragon Reborn and all that. Um, and now we end with the Moiraine we pretty much never see except for a couple of times probably, which is I'm just going to tell you everything straight out bluntly. But as she says, there are no secrets between Aes Sedai and Warder, or few secrets, and certainly in this,
Well,
she can't.
and I know it's not allowed anymore, but I guess it was still here because then we get actually a lesson that Lan gives her about moving on and burying the dead. And, you know, I know that's problematic, but the man
That's a
actually
good
gives
point.
a lesson at the end of the book. But, and
That speaking of problematic, yeah, that's a great point to wrap up how this is mostly Moraine's story. We get more of her than we do Lan, but we still get a lot of Lan. It's their story of how they came together and started on this mission. But he's also showing you how they managed to come so close and survive these 20 years in this incredible war that they're fighting all by themselves because they're that close, because they complement each other. It's melted my brain when you talked about Sanderson talking about how he had to push for the fight scene at the end of that first episode of, no, Lan needs to be in there too. Because anything that gets close, he takes care of. That's what he does. And she's roasting them on the. He had to fight for that. What the hell?
mm-hmm.
No, that's not. You don't even have to know the source material to see how that would be stupid. That's storytelling 101. That is building up characters together by showing where they're strong, where they're weak, how they complement each other, how they use their strengths, how they overcome their weaknesses.
Yeah,
That's
that's
just
actually
storytelling 101.
one of my notes from the show was not only did he fight in that battle, but I like that the final moment of that battle, he covers her when everything comes crashing down.
Hmm.
She was vulnerable out in the middle of the open with a wall coming to crash down on her, and he puts his body in the way. It was actually like, hey, that's actually a good moment there
Hmm.
to show you exactly what a warder does.
So my last thought here before we pause for a second so I can go let the dog in and then talk about spoilers is so the scene that pops into my head when we see this final moment with Moiraine just laying it all out for Lan is when Nynaeve sneaks up on them in the like first third of Eye of the World. So real early on, after they've escaped Shadar Logoth, and Nynaeve sneaks up on them, and she hears them talking to each other. And you, the reader, don't know what's going on. But it's not that Jordan is being purposefully cryptic. He's simply writing how two people who already know what they know would talk. She's not going to rehash what she's already known. He's not going to rehash what they've already been through together. So you go back and you reread that scene after you've read, not even the whole series. If you just read up to, say, where Moiraine meets her end with Lanfear on the docks, and then you go back and you reread, that scene's going to be entirely different because you're not looking at a one-sided conversation anymore. It's like you saw someone talking on the phone, and now all of a sudden you go back and you can hear both sides talking because he's it's what pulls you in because that's what makes them real people.
All right, so we're gonna pause and then spoilers.
Yep. All right. So spoilers for anyone who's first time, go away.
Do you want to do
I don't
comments first or spoilers first?
let me while I'm thinking about them, my two spoilery things. One, both of them are pretty quick but interesting. The fight between Lan and Rin, and then the fight between Galad and who is it that he duels at the end of the series to become Lord Captain Commander?
Oh, Valda.
Valda, who does the same thing, but it's not that. Um, I mean, you get the impression here that Rin just kind of he got some hits in and Lan was dragging, so he got overconfident. Valda purposely does that because he's a psychopath. He likes to make his opponent bleed before he kills him. Um, but then the other one that jumped in my head when you brought up um the arrogance of the one power was just a couple of books ago we had Rand asking Taim, "Hey, where's the sword teacher I got you? Oh, I got rid of him. I don't need him." And Rand got pissed, and Taim said, "Why? I can barely I can barely keep from stabbing myself, and I've never found the lack. Hmm, isn't that interesting?" And and especially a corollary there with the arrogance of the black of the shadow and their um uh confidence or overconfidence in their own power. Um, but also that's how a lot of them go down, especially the channelers is they're so used to they get tunnel vision. It's if you've ever uh listened to interviews with vets, um Air Force vets, they talk about this is a very real thing, and there are documented cases of pilots, especially in World War II, that were lost because they get so fixated on a target, they're not paying attention to their altimeter. And they follow that target all the way to the ground and kill themselves. Uh, so that's kind of what's going on here with these power wielders.
Well, I mean, it's the purpose of the warder to make sure that those things don't happen while she's doing her thing.
That's a good point.
But Bruce Lee talks about this. He says he doesn't fear a man with a knife because the man has just limited himself to one weapon, because the man with the knife only thinks of using the knife.
Mm-hmm.
Says, I only have one weapon to fear. am a man without a knife. I have his hands, his feet, his elbows, his knees, his head, everything to fear.
Yep, that's a good point. Did you have any other kind of final thoughts or spoilery thoughts about the book as a whole?
No, and I think spoilers have been kind of weak with this book
Hmm.
because Jordan on the audiobook actually has talks about his motives for writing this book,
Hmm.
other than just the ones we've talked about. But what he talks about in that is he wanted to write it as a standalone book. Someone who's never read Wheel of Time can pick it up and read it, and it would still be a good book.
Mm.
And so I think that's why we really didn't come out with a whole lot of spoilers, because everything is kind of self-contained in here.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I guess this the audio book that you can get on Amazon was originally taped back in like 2000 and 6 or something on cassette tape, not even CD, on
Okay.
cassette tapes. So and it's all super copyrighted. I wanted to play something like that, but I don't want to get us busted.
Yeah, and you get real finicky about that. Um,
So going from the the first, what just happened? Where do they
there we
go?
go.
Oh, all right. So yes, Scott agrees that Egwene did get exceptionally more annoying once Sando took over. I think it's not only just his style, but I don't think Sanderson understands people like Jordan did.
But yeah,
I think he makes characters and makes things that he think are cool in a world, and he's got to be at least decent at world building, or he wouldn't be a popular fantasy
yeah,
author.
having read a handful of his books, yes, he is really good at world building. He is really good at plot structure. He is really good at crafting a story. Um, I've just never connected with the character. I think that's a good way to put it. Is that's why I've read, like, I think a trilogy of his and then a standalone book. So I've read like four of his books, and they were entertaining. I read them all the way through, and I recall being entertained, but I can't really tell you much about the books
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't connect with me like these books do, like The Lord of the Rings does. You know, so they don't have the rereadability, and they don't stick in your head.
Mm-hmm. And I really think it, the devil's in the details, man. And the characters are so fleshed out because Jordan just understood people
Hmm.
and their motivations and their clicks and their just the nature of human interaction. Like I said, he probably didn't have the exact words to describe it in a scholarly manner, but he just intuitively understood people, male, female,
Yeah.
different cultures, and he was well traveled, so that helps. Uh, so that I think that's the big difference, and I think the characters that we stopped liking as much in that era of the books were ones that just seemed to like change.
Mm.
They became a kind of a shadowy trope of themselves. The story was still going on, and they were doing the things, but their personality was off. There was a little bit something. It's like the body snatchers. You know something's up with them, but they look just like the person
Yeah.
they took the body of.
It it makes me want to go read some of his earlier stuff, Jordan's. And I've heard his Conan books are really good. So I may go give those a try. Uh, Partly because I could use some good fiction to read because I haven't had any in a while, and partly because I'm curious to see if he crafts characters in much the same way. If that was something he was doing from the beginning, or if it was something he developed and then put to work once he started his baby, his magnum opus in Eye of the World.
Women and children first, which is why, at least in the old film, the man who dresses as a woman to try to sneak into the lifeboat is treated as such a coward and a cheat. Yeah, and that's a twofold, because at least if a misogynistic man stands up and says that's my spot, at least he's doing it in a manly way.
Hmm.
To try to just lie your way into something, that even takes it to another level of cowardice. I hate everything about this older woman trying to run his life. It's a terrible custom and surprises me why Lan didn't avoid the Borderlands. Well, that wouldn't have made for a very good book there. But
Well, but he's drawn to the Borderlands. We see that after uh the last time we see him there in the um oh, when was that? Early in the book, where Bukama convinces him to go off and explore a little bit, to see the world a little bit. And then when we finally get back to him, he's in his head grumbling and complaining that they spent so long away. He can't. His private war against the shadow just won't let him stay away.
Well, there's that, but also he wholeheartedly intended to avoid this woman. But when he found out what she was doing, he had to confront her because
Yeah,
she was raising the golden crane, which
that's a good point. And
yeah.
the
And that might
last
be one
anyone,
of his motivations for being around there to make
yeah,
sure that that doesn't happen while he's gone.
and you get that too in the that's a good point, because when he first finds out about this, Ren is saying a lot of people thought you were dead because the last anyone knew was that you were at the Blood Snows, and then you kind of disappeared. I mean, there ain't no internet here. You know, there's barely even a mail service, so
Well,
no one's gonna know he's still alive.
and there's a parallel to this in the regular books later, which is super spoilery. Nynaeve does the same thing. She goes up and raises the golden crane for him to force him to go up there and do his kingly duty.
But she does it in a wifely way, not in a political way,
But she still does it
which
behind his
is,
back, and
well, kind of in front of his back, because she she extracts the promise from him, and then she dumps him off at World's End, and so he realizes it right away. But yeah, she had this plan all along. It is one of my favorite scenes in the entire series of that, and then when it cuts to the Valkyrie merchant who's sitting there, and I love seeing Nynaeve from his perspective because she's so odd looking. Uh, because she's clearly not a Borderlander, and yet she's wearing the whatchamacallit.
mm-hmm.
And so the wearing the red dot and has Lan's ring around her neck still. So that is by far one of my, I would probably say, top 5 favorite scenes in the whole series.
And the next one is still on the subject of Guitarra possibly being black. Yeah, there's no evidence for or against, but yeah, it does make for a nice little parallel with Varen confessing
Yeah,
her guilt. But from what I understand, Guitarra didn't know she was going to die. It was the force of the foretelling itself that put her over the edge.
yeah.
Because isn't it taxing on your body to have that moment happen? Even Elida collapses every time she has a foretelling, and she's Moraine's age. She's relatively young.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Um,
what
people always talked about how, well, that's because I don't remember where I read that of who connected to the production of the show was talking about how they were such big fans that when Memory of Light came out, they were waiting in line for it, and they got it, and they went to a pub and they sat there reading it the whole day. That book's a freaking dictionary. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
You didn't read that in one sitting. I've read some really long books in one sitting, but it was it was like 18 hours, 24 hours. That's people. When I was a kid, people would talk about how I read, oh, you're such a fast reader. I wasn't a fast reader. I would just read a lot. So if I had something I liked, I'm just going to sit there and I'm going to keep reading it until my eyes get blurry, literally. So when I was a lad, there were times where I would stay up for 24 hours or close to it reading a book that I didn't want to put down.
Well, that's all the comments. Personally, I thought Memory of Light was kind of hard to read because it was Sando's style of having 2 parallels going on at the same time every chapter. but then there was just so much to close off that you couldn't have these little dualities every
Yeah.
time, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it wasn't one of the problems with that book. Um, and furthering my contention that there should have been at least one more, if not two more books, is that you would think by the time you get to the grand finale of this ridiculously long series that it would just be like three main storylines. You've got Rand, you've got Matt, and you've got Perrin, and then however the girls line up with what they're doing. And you kind of have that a little bit towards the end, but not really. I mean, there's so many little things going on. He's trying to cover so many of the smaller characters and the smaller plot lines, and it's just all over the place. Um, it it my recollection of when I read it for the first time was that it was a satisfactory ending, but it wasn't a good ending.
Mm-hmm. There were just too many moments in it where it just felt to me like it was like, I'm going to write this because it's cool, not because it's the best ending, the best
Yeah.
solution,
Yeah.
or you know, the best example is Matt wading into the front of the battlefield when we have Matt's own mind earlier in the book saying
Numerous times.
never would a general do that.
Yeah. Yeah. My favorite one being the you know, is it in the fight in front of no, it's when the it's when the Aiel sneak into his camp or our gateway into his camp and try and assassinate him, and he's the general that leads from the front is a fool, uh but in his own mind it was man could get killed in there, which is classic Matt. That's how it's done, and yeah, Matt gets better by the third book as far as consistency with who he used to be, but he's still not right.
Yeah.
He's never right through the last three books.
Or the scene they kind of goes over him killing Cooladin. He's like, we're gonna try to sneak between these two hills and get out of here and be away. And all of a sudden, there were Aiel coming over the top. That's how he ended up fighting Cooladin, not because
Yeah,
he was leading from the front or anything. He was ambushed.
he was trying to get away, and every time it grew the legend because the officers with him thought, oh, he's looking for another fight. Oh,
All right. Well, that's all I have on that. We finished another one. New Spring. We'll be on to Path of Daggers next
mhm.
time, which I gotta
Which
I gotta brush up on because I haven't.
yeah, I got to brush up on it. I got to find something to say about it. I have a feeling we might go through that every bit as quick as we went through New Spring, even though it's significantly longer because I kind of feel like about it like I do New Spring in a lot of ways. I enjoy New Spring more, but to your point about there not being any spoilers, not a lot to talk about, because it's pretty much a contained small story. And that's how I feel about Path of Daggers in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's less set up for later and more just people doing things.
Mhm. Yeah, and the ramifications from the events that happen in of Daggers really don't come into play until a little later, I feel. Because when we get into Winter's Heart, he's doing something completely different, kind of completely disconnected from the rest of the world
Mm-hmm.
because he's basically run off into hiding. So it'll be interesting. Maybe something will, since I'm looking at it from a different perspective, maybe something will, you know, uh, jump into my head while we're talking about it. So we'll see, but we'll get into it next Friday.
All right. If you want to hang around, we're going to do a part two. It should be short. Heath has
Mhm.
something I have no idea what it's going to be about, but I'll get these up as quickly as I can. It took a while for the other ones. For some reason, they just took forever
Mhm.
to render, but those are up. I'm going to try to get these up tonight. It might be late, but I'll try to get them up tonight. And read on, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.